The morning air hung heavy with the scent of crushed olives and myrtle as the first golden fingers of sunlight stretched across the Judean hills, setting ablaze the dew-kissed spiderwebs strung between the thorny branches of acacia trees lining the Jericho road. Jerusalem's eastern gate stood silhouetted against the brightening sky, its ancient stones still cool from the night's embrace, the iron hinges groaning faintly as guards pushed them open to admit the festival pilgrims already streaming toward the Temple Mount. Among them came a murmur, a ripple of movement parting the dusty throng, as a figure astride a young donkey colt emerged from the ribbon of shadow cast by the Mount of Olives, his silhouette framed momentarily by the rising sun like a living menorah. The animal, its coat the color of cinnamon bark still clinging to the tree, picked its way delicately over the uneven stones, its unshod hooves whispering against the pavement worn smooth by generations of Passover pilgrims. Its nostrils flared at the sudden press of bodies, the scent of unwashed wool tunics and frying lentil cakes thick in the air. But it did not balk, seeming to sense the quiet authority of the man whose calloused carpenter's hands held the reins loosely, hands that had once smoothed the grain of Syrian cedar into yokes for oxen, now guiding this humble creature toward destiny. Behind him, his disciples exchanged glances, their sun-weathered faces alight with something between exhilaration and unease, their fingers unconsciously brushing the hidden knives at their belts as the crowd's fervor swelled like floodwaters in the Kidron Valley after winter rains. A woman near the front, her headscarf frayed at the edges from years of mending, gasped as recognition dawned. "It's the rabbi from Nazareth," she cried, her voice cracking like a clay jar shattered on stone. "The one who made the water into wine at my cousin's wedding." Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the knot securing her outer cloak, a garment of coarse Galilean weave passed down from her grandmother, and with sudden abandon she flung it across the donkey's path, the faded indigo fabric fluttering like a wounded bird before settling onto the dust. The gesture sparked a frenzy. All along the road, pilgrims tore at their own garments, stripping off outer robes woven from the wool of Bethlehem sheep, while children scrambled up the gnarled trunks of sycamore trees, their small hands stripping tender green branches that released a sharp, resinous fragrance as they rained down upon the procession. From the direction of the temple's pinnacle, where the morning sacrifices' smoke curled skyward in a twisting gray column, the distant bleating of lambs carried on the wind, thousands of unblemished yearlings awaiting slaughter in the court of the priests. The sound mingled strangely with the crowd's growing chant of Hosanna, a word that meant both save us and praise, their voices rising like the psalms of ascent once sung by pilgrims approaching these very gates. A Pharisee named Eleazar ben Ezra, his beard meticulously oiled and his tassels hanging precisely 4 fingers' breadth from the hem of his robe, recoiled as a palm frond brushed his shoulder. "Do you not see what these fools are doing?" he hissed to his companion, gesturing toward the growing carpet of garments. "They treat him like a conquering king. Only Caesar merits such honors, or the Messiah himself." His companion, a temple treasurer whose fingers bore the permanent stain of silver shekels, merely smiled grimly and murmured, "Let them have their profit. By week's end, both he and their hopes will be dust." The temple cleansing, righteous fury in the house of God. 2 days later, the scent of blood and incense lay thick over the temple courts as Jesus ascended the broad steps leading to the royal stoa, his sandals scuffing against stone worn concave by centuries of worshippers. The morning sun glared off the gilded temple facade, forcing him to raise a hand against the brilliance as he surveyed the scene below, a teeming marketplace where the sacred and profane collided with jarring dissonance. In the court of the Gentiles, money changers' tables formed a labyrinth of greed, their wooden surfaces scarred by countless coin edges, each stall flying the banner of a different trading family. The house of Annas with its silver scales, the sons of Boethius with their Roman denarii stacked in precise pyramids. The metallic clink of currency blended with the cacophony of haggling voices. 30 drachma for your sacrifice, no less. This dove has a blemished wing, take half price, while the stench of animal dung rose from the paving stones where sacrificial beasts awaited purchase. A vein throbbed visibly at Jesus' temple as his gaze fell upon a scene near the Gate Beautiful. A stooped widow in a patched cloak, her knuckles swollen with years of grinding barley, hesitating before a money changer's table, The merchant, his belly straining against a sash woven with Tyrian purple, snatched the 2 copper leptons from her palm, all she possessed, and tossed her a worn shekel in exchange. "For the temple tax," he sneered, already turning to a wealthier customer, unaware that the widow's mite represented her last sustenance until the next barley harvest. Something in Jesus' posture shifted, the quiet intensity that had drawn children to his lap now hardening into something terrifying. And when he moved, it was with the suddenness of a desert sirocco. His first blow sent the nearest table flying, its wooden legs splintering against a marble column as coins rained down in a silver cascade, bouncing across the stones with hollow pings. "My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer." The words erupted from his throat like lava from a long, dormant volcano, raw with a fury that sent pigeons exploding skyward in a flurry of wings. "But you have made it a den of thieves!" A whip of braided cords appeared in his hands. Where had he gotten it? And its crack sent money changers scrambling, their carefully stacked coins rolling into the gutters where beggars already dove to claim them. In the chaos that followed, doves burst from overturned cages, their white wings beating against the smoke-filled air, while oxen, startled by the commotion, lowed in terror and strained against their ropes. Near the chamber of hewn stone, Caiaphas the high priest paused in his examination of Passover ritual implements, his jeweled breastplate catching the light as he turned toward the disturbance. Through the colonnade's shadowed arches, he watched as Jesus overturned another table, his face illuminated by a shaft of sunlight that made his eyes burn like coals. "This cannot continue," Caiaphas murmured to his father-in-law Annas, whose gnarled fingers still bore the marks of a lifetime counting temple tribute. "If we let him go on, the Romans will see this unrest and remove what little authority we still possess." Annas, his voice dry as parchment, replied with a proverb from the Babylonian Talmud, "Better one man perish than the whole nation be destroyed." Their eyes met in silent understanding as another table crashed to the ground. The Last Supper, shadows and sacrament in the upper room. The upper room smelled of yeast and wood smoke, its plaster walls still radiating the day's heat as 13 men gathered around a low table draped in linen bleached white by countless fullings. Through the open window, the last embers of sunset gilded the rooftops of the upper city, where servants hurried to light the evening lamps in wealthy homes. John, his youthful face flushed from climbing the steep alleyways, leaned close to Jesus and whispered, "The lamb was perfect, without spot or blemish, just as the law requires." He didn't mention how the temple guards had eyed them suspiciously as they carried the roasted meat through the streets, nor how Peter had nearly come to blows with a Levite who accused them of stealing the sacrificial portion. Jesus nodded absently, his fingers tracing the grain of the cypress wood table, a craftsman's unconscious gesture, as his gaze traveled over the faces illuminated by the olive oil lamps. Peter's rough-hewn features set in uncharacteristic quietude. Thomas's skeptical brow furrowed as he examined the bitter herbs. Judas Iscariot's restless fingers drumming against his thigh in a rhythm that matched no known melody. The weight of impending sorrow pressed upon him like the millstones that ground the temple's fine flour, and when he spoke, his voice carried the gravity of mountains shifting. "I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." A stunned silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the lamps and the distant cry of a street vendor selling roasted chickpeas. Andrew dropped the unleavened bread he'd been breaking, the crisp wafer shattering like pottery on the tiled floor. It was Judas who recovered first, his voice oddly strained as he gestured to the golden cup of Elijah standing untouched at the table's center. "Master, surely the kingdom comes tonight. The prophets say Elijah must—" "Take this and divide it among yourselves," Jesus interrupted, lifting a common clay cup filled with wine so dark it seemed black in the flickering light. "For I tell you, I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." As the cup passed from calloused hand to calloused hand, each man drank deeply, unaware they shared the very blood of the covenant that would soon stain Golgotha's stones. Then came the bread, flat and brittle from the baker's oven, pierced with holes like the matzah of affliction, which Jesus lifted with the solemnity of a priest raising the shewbread before the Holy of Holies. "This is my body, given for you." The words hung suspended in the lamplight as he broke the loaf with a sound like a bone snapping, the fragments falling onto a woven basket that moments before had held the Passover lamb. "Do this in remembrance of me." Judas recoiled as if burned when a crumb landed near his elbow, his eyes darting toward the door where shadows lengthened with the approaching night. Gethsemane, the agony of obedience. The Garden of Gethsemane slept beneath a mantle of stars when Jesus stumbled past its ancient olive trees, their gnarled trunks twisted like the sinews of some primordial giant frozen in agony. The night air carried the sharp fragrance of crushed herbs, wild mint and hyssop crushed underfoot, mingling with the metallic tang of fear sweat soaking through his tunic. Somewhere in the valley below, a jackal's cry pierced the darkness, the sound echoing off the Kidron's dry stream bed like a lost soul's lament. "Stay here and watch," he commanded the 3 disciples, who had followed him deepest into the garden, Peter, James, and John, their faces drawn and pallid in the moonlight. They nodded, their usual bravado drained away by the ominous weight in his voice, and settled against a mossy boulder that still retained the day's warmth. But as Jesus withdrew another stone's throw, falling to his knees with a force that must have bruised flesh against rock, he found their drowsy murmurs fading beneath the roaring tempest in his soul. The cup, the same cup he had passed at supper, now loomed before his spiritual vision, not of clay but of wrath, filled not with wine, but with the concentrated fury of divine judgment against all human rebellion. He could smell its contents, the acrid stench of Sodom's sulfur, the coppery reek of Egypt's firstborn corpses, the putrid decay of generations of unburied sinners outside Jerusalem's gates, and his stomach convulsed. Abba, Father, the Aramaic child's term for daddy escaping his lips in a way it never had during his public ministry. "All things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me." A droplet of sweat, or was it blood, rolled down his temple, its progress searing like molten lead. When no answer came but the rustle of olive leaves in the night breeze, his prayer intensified, his fingers clawing at the rocky soil until dirt packed beneath his nails. The cosmic loneliness pressed upon him until capillaries burst in his sweat glands, mingling crimson with clear fluid to stain his robe pink in the moonlight. Somewhere beyond time, the hosts of heaven stood poised with swords drawn, awaiting but a word to obliterate the Roman cohort already marching toward Gethsemane. The legions of hell massed in the valley below, their shadowy forms visible only to spiritual eyes, their whispered taunts carrying on the wind. He will not go through with it. No one loves them that much. Yet when he raised his face a third time, streaked with dirt and anguish, the words came with finality. "Not my will, but yours, be done." At that moment, across the garden, Peter jerked awake to see his master's form illuminated by a light no moon could cast, his clothing whiter than any fuller on earth could bleach them, before the radiance faded, leaving only a man standing with quiet resolve as torchlights flickered through the olive trees. The Crucifixion, love's terrible triumph. The scent of burning flesh hung over Golgotha as the execution detail drove the nails, not the tidy round spikes of later Christian art, but rough iron squares torn from some Syrian smith's scrap pile. The first blow elicited a gasp that became a groan as the metal sheared through the delicate bones of the wrist, not the palm, which would tear under body weight, severing the median nerve in an explosion of pain that modern medicine compares to third-degree burns. The crossbeam, already stained with the blood and feces of previous victims, shuddered as soldiers heaved it upright, its rough timber scraping against the permanent upright with a sound like a bone breaking. From his vantage point, the centurion Longinus, a career soldier whose nose had been broken so many times he could only breathe through his mouth, watched with professional interest as the Nazarene's body sagged, the shoulders dislocating with audible pops. "Pilate's joke won't last long," he remarked to the legionary driving the titulus above the condemned man's head. The soldier grunted in agreement, hammering the sign that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," in mocking trilingual script, its letters uneven as if the writer had been drunk. But as the hours wore on and the sun darkened at midday, an eclipse impossible during Passover's full moon, Longinus found himself unsettled. This one didn't scream curses like the zealots or beg for death like the thieves. Even through the agony of asphyxiation, for crucifixion kills by slow suffocation as the diaphragm collapses, he spoke, not to the mocking priests or gambling soldiers, but to a shivering boy pressed against his mother's skirts in the crowd. "John, behold your mother." The words cost him. Longinus saw the effort it took to draw breath enough to speak, the way his ribcage strained against the nails. When the final cry came, tetelestai, a Greek accounting term meaning paid in full, it carried such authority that Longinus's hand went to his sword hilt. The earth answered with a groan, the temple veil ripping from top to bottom in a supernatural display that sent priests scrambling from the holy place, their ritual purity compromised by the sudden exposure to common air. As the centurion wiped blood from his face, when had it started raining, he heard himself say words no Roman soldier should utter. Surely this man was the Son of God. The resurrection. Dawn's unquenchable light. Mary Magdalene's fingers trembled as she measured out the myrrh, 39 shekels worth, purchased from Nicodemus's own storeroom, its bitter fragrance mingling with the pre-dawn chill that seeped through her widow's garments. The other women whispered behind her as they walked the path to the tomb, their voices hushed as much by grief as by fear of Roman patrols. Who will roll away the stone? Salome fretted, her practical mind already calculating the weight of the circular barrier, easily a ton of solid limestone, that sealed the burial chamber. But when they rounded the final bend, the garden's tranquility shattered by the sight of the stone already rolled aside, its track in the earth showing no signs of human effort. The tomb's mouth gaped like a wound in the hillside, darker than the retreating night, exhaling air several degrees colder than the surrounding dawn. Mary's oil lamp revealed two figures sitting where the body should have been, their robes shimmering with a light that hurt the eyes, their faces bearing an expression that was neither quite smile nor frown, but something infinitely older. "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" The question reverberated in the small space, shaking loose a shower of limestone flakes from the ceiling. As the women fled, their spices abandoned in the dirt, Mary alone remained, her tears falling onto the empty linen wrappings that lay collapsed like a shed chrysalis. It was there, in the gray light of a world being reborn, that she heard her name spoken with a tenderness that cracked the foundations of death itself.